Viras Pharmaceutical is a leading pharma company having strong presence in fertility business and being a knowledge partner and continuing the commitment of scientific update and to engage you all during this COVID-19 outbreak. We at INTA's Women Health team, under the leadership of Mr. Satpathy, has organized this webinar on panel discussion, ovulation induction basics to advance in COH. The moderator for this are Dr. Nupur Garg, fertility specialist, SCI IVF Center, Noida, Delhi, and Dr. Jyoti Malik, Director, JJ Institute Medical Science Roots IVF, Haryana. I welcome you all. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Sonal. Good evening and welcome everyone to an interesting brainstorming session of panel discussion on ovulation induction basics to advances in ovarian stimulation. Thank you, INTAS, for organizing this session today. We have a host of eminent panelists today. Their knowledge in this field of reproductive medicine is just immense, and we are honored to be sharing this platform today with them. So joining with us today is Dr. Anjali Tempe. She is Director, Professor and ex-head of Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Maulana Azad Medical College. She is IVF in charge of ART Center, Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Maulana Azad Medical College, with interest in endoscopy, high-risk pregnancy. We welcome you, ma'am. Then we have Dr. Sudha Prasad. She is President, Indian Fertility Society 2020-2022. Director, Matritva Advanced IVF and Training Center. Thanks for joining us, ma'am. And we have Dr. Professor Neeta Singh, ma'am. She is Professor, Division of Reproductive Medicine, Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, All India Institute of Medical.
Yeah, and then we have another very eminent faculty joining us, Dr. K.D. Nair from Mata Chanan Devi Hospital and Akansha IVF. He is the head of department, and he is a very senior consultant, very experienced. Many of us juniors have trained under him and have taken imbibed knowledge from him. We have another Professor Surveen Guhuman Sindhu. She is Director, Head IVF Reproductive Medicine, Max Super Specialty Hospital, Panchsheel, Saket, and she is Professor, School of Health Sciences, Ansar University. And not the least, we have very bright and ever shining Dr. Shivani Sachdev Kaur, my dear friend, who's Director of SCI Healthcare, she's founder secretary, Delhi State Chapter of ESAR, and Delhi State Chapter ISPAT, and she is General Secretary in STAR. So we have a very important discussion today, and we are going to talk from basics to advance, something from very minimal, very basic to something very complex. Whatever is new on this planet, we are going to ask our faculty and we are going to discuss. So we know that why we want to induce ovulation, there could be an ovulation, and that's why we are inducing ovulation, to get at least one follicle. But what is super ovulation and what is controlled ovarian stimulation? There it could be anovulatory or ovulatory, but here our idea is to get more than one follicles, or maybe in COH we need to have as many follicles, and how many, we will answer that magic figure soon when we are discussing. Now we have this WHO classification. We have these 4 types of anovulation, where we have hypo, or the second group is eugonadotrophic, euestrogenic. The third is hypergonadotrophic. The second group is the most important. 75 to 85% women come under this group, anovulatory women. And PCOS is the example of it. And then we have 20% in hypergonadotrophic, that is POF, and 5 to 10% per prolactinemic. Now, coming straight to our very eminent doctor, Dr. Sudha Prasad, ma'am. Ma'am, this is a lady, 22-year-old, working in IT company. You know how IT people are and how educated and well updated they are. So they are very hard to handle. So that is why I've chosen you to help her. Now she is working in this IT company, married for 6 months, has regular periods in menarche, has acne off and on, a case of PCOS, was overseas since she got married. She has a BMI of 27. Her sister has similar history. She had IBS, had gestational diabetes. So now the girl is worried that she will also undergo the same thing. Now, what she wants advice from you, that what is the natural way to live without hormonal medications. Her AMH is 6.5, FSH 4.5, LH is 10. She has PCOS ovaries on ultrasounds. What do you advise her?
Yes, Jyoti, this is a girl. She's a young girl of 22 and she's in IT company. Once you say IT, that means she's not having the good time to interact with the husband. Number one, to interact at home, to give time on her to change the lifestyle modification. So this may all affect the ovulation and she may be anovulatory. This may be the reason of this. So if you said that her AMH is absolutely fine, and what exactly we want that
6.5.
it is 6.5, it is on the higher side, and she's a polycystic ovarian syndrome probably. So BMI is 27. So we will advise her to just give some time on her to have the little exercises. There are gyms at home these days. She need not go to outside. Little modification, little 5% decrease of the weight, total weight, can cause good ovulation. And if the tubes are patent, if the sperm count is absolutely normal, then she can conceive herself, number one. Number two, of course, these kind of patients are more prone for the diabetes. So blood sugar we should do. We should see insulin resistance is there or not. If insulin resistance is there, then only I'm telling you, then only we will start metformin. Because if she is not conceived, we cannot say you go lifestyle modification and come 6 months after. No, simultaneously we will provide her this advice and we will start metformin. It should be given 500 milligram 3 times a day, but slowly you increase, like 500, what I gave 500 daily for 3 days, then BD for 3 days, then 3 times a day for 3 days with food. So she should not have any GI symptom. This is very much important. Many times, if the insulin resistance is there, metformin is given for 1 month before starting any stimulation. Probably she will have...
Metformin, I think we will be discussing with some other person. So right now in this, I want you to focus on the diet and the exercise, because she is only 6 months.
Okay, okay, because once you
married,
made it...
sorry, 6 months married. So she's not in a hurry to conceive, but because of her sister and because of her PCO, she is concerned. So basically, I want you to
okay.
stress upon
So
our viewers about the health lifestyle, how much workout she should be doing now in COVID times, what she has, because just walking on the treadmill would be the answer to her, I think, support for the
yes.
But other things, what diet, which diet, something, I mean, lifestyle.
Okay, so one is the lifestyle modification. She has to do exercise. I will just convey her that at least 30-35 minutes daily, daily she should do little exercise. So the weight loss should be there. You can't say that you start doing one hour daily. It is not feasible for her. The person who has not, right, like me, I have never done the exercise. So this may be the possibility. Of course, the diet is very much, we do not know. Every obese person says that she's not eating, but they are eating. So we have to give the low energy, low calorie diet to her. That there are many diet like keto diet, Medit diet, many different kind of diets are available. But I will tell you, if they will have the big full plate of salads, and then they start one meal with the low carbohydrate, more protein, and nothing in between the lunch and the dinner, probably it will be good, and no magic will be there. She has time. She is married for 6 months only, so she has time. What I mean that if we will add after this 5% loss of weight, if we add some medicine like metformin, probably she won't come to us, she may conceive. So we should not say that 1 year, you come after 1 year, she's already 32. So we have to tell her the fertile period, because she's in IT. She may not be knowing what time of how many times the sexual relation has to be kept. It has been seen, if sexual relation once in a week, it gives the pregnancy rate of only 7% in one cycle. And if it is 3 times in a week, it increases to 45%. So we have to teach her that this is the possibility that pregnancy can occur. There is nothing abnormal in her, and she should concentrate on her weight also, that she should try to reduce. That's it.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your practical tips. Because being in IT, we have to also tell them that they have to give proper time to each other, and also magic figure of losing weight will definitely help her. And yeah, definitely she needs to exercise, because 5 to 10% weight reduction can really help her out. Now, for weight loss, they say that a minimum of 250 minutes per week of moderate intense activity, or 150 minutes per week of a vigorous activity is very good. And any diet can be okay. She can follow Mediterranean, keto, DASH, any diet, but it should be 1200 to 1500 kilocalories per day. And very rightly you told her how she has to eat. The plate should be small, and she has to have more less of carbs actually in these cases. Yeah, Dr. Nupur.
So thank you, Dr. Sudha. Coming to Dr. Surbeen, ma'am. Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Ha, ma'am. So, ma'am, as is the same case as Dr. Sudha suggested, apart from lifestyle modification, what is your opinion on starting of metformin and myo-inositol in this patient?
So we must understand that she is. Can you hear?
There's some problem with your audio. There's some problem with the audio, Dr.
दीदी टमाटर काट दो अच्छा काट दो चाय बना दो
Someone has joined from 2 devices. They have to log off the one device.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
ये चाय बना दो
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So one device has the video and the other has the audio. I switched off the one with the video. Okay. So great to be back with all of you. So
Surbeen, your video is not coming.
I know. Actually, there is one laptop on which the video comes and one on which the audio comes. So there was a interference in both. So I switched off.
Audio is more important.
Yeah. So I switched on the audio now.
Okay, great.
Okay, so we must consider this patient as a patient who is actually not receiving fertility treatment because she just married for 6 months. So she is a young patient, married for 6 months, obese, with PCOS. What do we do for her? Well, metformin, as the take is with the international guidelines, that you can use it for an obese patient. However, there are a lot of side effects, and it is not really proven whether there is an absolute benefit. The benefit is definitely there in BMI and testosterone and LDL, but they haven't seen it with insulin levels, blood sugar, or with pre-androgen index. So there are some studies which are quoting yes and some no. So the ones which are quoting yes are the ones for BMI. And when we look at this patient, she would require metformin, and we can give it to her but provided we tell her that it is an off-label use, that is very, very important. We counsel her about the side effects of this drug, the gastrointestinal side effects. We also start the dose gradually with a 500 daily and then increments of 500 every 5 days. And if we are giving it to her long term, because she's young and we may need to give it to her for a long term period, then there is an incidence of low vitamin B12 and we need to give her supplements for that. So definitely with obese people, one can think of giving metformin, provided we take care of all these factors. And this metformin can be given along with lifestyle changes. Metformin has also been tried along with combined oral contraceptive pills, and they found that there is a benefit in these girls.
Yeah.
Okay, so so the take-home message here for metformin is a patient who has glucose intolerance, obese. In such patients, it can be combined with lifestyle modification to help boost up the profile, hormonal profile. And once before giving the patient, it is important that we discuss this evidence and side effects and concomitant.
Yeah.
Dr. Jyoti, haan.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Nupur. Now, Dr. Anjali ma'am, we have this case. We have this 27-year-old woman presenting with primary infertility for 3 years. She has irregular periods. She has the cycles day 4 to 5 bleeding days and 45 to 60 days cycle. She is BMI 21, married for 4 years with patent AMH of 8.6. Her day 2 FSH is 4.5, H is 10, prolactin is 30, and her day 2 scan is normal. AFC is more than 40. Now she has been on a healthy diet, on a regular exercise for last 6 months. The HSA is normal. What would be the line of management here?
Anjali ma'am?
Dr. Anjali?
Yeah,
Dr.
ma'am.
Anjali?
Dr. Anjali? She's there.
Yeah, Dr. Anjali, can you hear us? I think Dr. Anjali cannot hear. Dr. Nupur?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
So here, hello, ma'am, Dr. Anjali ma'am.
Yeah, now it is connecting to her audio. Yeah, Dr. Anjali. Dr. Anjali, we are waiting for you. Hello.
Hello.
Just move the screen, Dr. Nupur. Now, Dr. Anjali, can you hear us? Since Dr. Anjali is not able to connect, so this is actually a case of PCO. So because it has a AFC of more than 40, and now we have the first line, Letroz should be the first line of management in these cases, with anovulatory infertility and with no other causes of infertility. And Letroz has been shown to have increased live birth rate as compared to CC for ovulation induction. It also leads to a higher clinical pregnancy rate. There is a shorter time to pregnancy in these cases compared to CC. Whereas in CC, we would need 6 cycles. Here, we would, in 4 cycles itself, she would be able to conceive. Now, comparing the birth rate, also Letroz has higher birth rate. Why? Because it causes increase in the intrafollicular antigen concentration, and it increases the variant follicular FSH receptor mRNAs. And therefore, there is greater ovulation rate per cycle in the Letroz group. Also, there is lower mid-cycle estradiol levels and higher progesterone. So all these are the factors why Letroz takes lesser time in helping the patients conceive. It's also, it is patient friendly. It is given by oral route, has minimum side effects, is cost effective as compared to gonadotropins, has least anti-estrogenic effects as compared to CC on the endometrium and on the cervical mucosa. Also, it has been seen that there is minimal risk of OHSS as compared to gonadotropins, and also risk of multiple pregnancies with letrozole is less. Now, if we have combined it with the gonadotropins, the dose requirement of the FSH decreases markedly when we have added letroz with gonadotropins. And, Dr. Nupur, the mechanism of action, would you like to highlight what it acts?
So letrozole basically acts by aromatase inhibition. So it prevents the conversion of androgen to estrogen because of the low estrogen level, which is seen by the hypothalamic pituitary axis as low. So the negative feedback is stopped, and which increases the FSH secretion, and which leads to the recruitment of the follicles. But since there is no downregulation of the receptors, as soon as the estrogen rise, the activation of the pituitary axis, it leads to monofollicular growth. This is how the letrozole acts, and it has been found previous studies which showed that it might be associated with some teratogenic effect. It is refuted now. Current studies shown that it is absolutely safe, and actually safer than clomiphene because of its short half-life. It is completely eliminated from the body and not present at the time of embryogenesis. So our next question to Dr. Shivani. Role of metformin as a first line drug for ovulation induction.
Yeah, Dr. Shivani.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Nupur. So metformin definitely can be used, and it was used earlier in the past. However, right now it is not recommended. And the reason is that after the New England Journal of Medicine published the study with metformin and comparing metformin with clomiphene, it was shown that metformin alone is not effective for ovulation, and the pregnancy rates are very low. So that is why currently the recommendation is that if it is going to be used for ovulation induction, it should be used in combination with clomiphene citrate. However, there are certain retrospective studies which have shown that it can reduce the risk of miscarriage. So I always advise metformin, and I continue it even in the first 2 months of pregnancy because of reduction of OHSS and reduction of risk of miscarriage. These are the two critical ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shivani. So our recommendation for metformin is should not be used alone, preferably along with clomiphene citrate. Dr. Shivani, what about other first-line ovulation inductions? Would you recommend gonadotropins as first-line ovulation induction?
See, there is no question that gonadotropins are associated. If you see the unexplained infertility study, it has a 17% pregnancy rate versus 9% or just 3% with just simple IUI alone. So gonadotropin only cycle are the most successful cycle. However, as a first line, I would not recommend gonadotropin only because of the increased cost, the increased risk of OHSS and multiple pregnancy. So it is a very good second line agent, but not a first line agent, except in certain rare cases, but not in PCOS.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Shivani. So, although we see that gonadotropin associated with high pregnancy rate, but there are associated adverse effects. And the recent recommendation from international evidence-based guidelines also suggests that gonadotropin, if are being used, they should be used with after counseling the patients about the risk associated, and the person who is using should have the required expertise in their use. Then only gonadotropin should be used as a first line agent, otherwise they shouldn't be used.
Right. So coming on to our next question, I would ask this question from Professor Neeta Singh. Ma'am, this 26-year-old woman presenting with primary infertility with a BMI of 20 with PCOS with history of previous cycles cancer because of multifollicular growth and OHSS with 100 mg of clomiphene citrate in previous cycle. She has an AMH of 10.2. Now, how would you manage her? What would be your line of action? What would you start with? What dose? Whether you would still go with CC or you would like to change your expert comments, ma'am, on this. Dr. Geeta Singh, ma'am. Ma'am, please unmute.
Mute.
Ma'am,
Okay.
yeah, now it's okay.
Unmute?
Yeah, it's okay now. You're unmuted.
Oh, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you're audible.
Okay. So this is a very, very interesting scenario. This young lady
Hello.
who's, hello. Hi.
Hello,
Hi.
Dr. Tempe here. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible. Dr. Anjali,
I'm
you are audible.
not seen, or am I seen?
You are seen. Actually, we missed you in last question. So, in fact, your question had to be covered by Dr. Nupur and me. So we would
Doesn't
come
matter. There
to
was a technical problem. So am I
Right.
audible and seen now?
Yes,
Yes, yes,
now
ma'am.
you are with us, ma'am. Now we'll come to you shortly.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Neeta, ma'am,
Yeah,
please.
yeah, Jyoti. So in this patient, we have three options. This patient is a lean PCOS because her BMI is less, and she has shown hyper response with the dose of 100 milligram of clomiphene citrate in the previous cycle, and she is really a bad PCOS. You can see the AMH of 11.2 nanogram. So my advice in such a case that how I will manage is I would add metformin, a very low dose metformin, because metformin is shown to reduce the hyperstimulation. And secondly, I would like to use letrozole instead of clomiphene as a first line drug. And we can start a very low dose letrozole, maybe 2.5 milligram, and then see how it goes. We can increase the dose of letrozole from 2.5 to 5 and then see if she ovulates on that dose. And we will be able to induce ovulation in sequential manner one by one.
Right. So, ma'am, you said you would like to give a very low dose of metformin. Why do you say that?
Not low dose of letrozole.
Okay, because I heard that you said initially a low dose of metformin and then you mentioned a low dose of letrozole. So you would like to give her metformin of 1500 mg in a step up, like Dr. Surbi suggested to us?
Yes, escalating. I would, in this patient, I think 1000 milligrams should be all right. 500 milligram BD should be all right for this
Right.
patient.
So straight, you don't want to reduce the dose of clomiphene, but you like to switch over to letrozole here.
Yes.
Because
yes.
do you think with letrozole, the chances of ovarian hyperstimulation are less?
Yes.
Because
There are two, there are two advantages by giving letrozole. It keeps the estradiol, overall estradiol level in check. Therefore, the hyperstimulation is less. And with the recent papers, it has shown higher pregnancy rate with letrozole in PCOS as compared to clomiphene, and therefore they recommend letrozole to be as a first-line drug in these patients.
Right, but there was this somewhere there was a paper where they said even with letrozole you can get a despite a monofollicular, there is still a chance of OHSS even with letrozole. So this Cochrane Freinig 2018 paper, this states that despite the tendency for monofollicular development, there is a high quality evidence that OHSS rates are similar with letrozole or clomiphene. So we have to be still careful
Yes.
with letrozole.
Yes.
That is something.
Any drug is not safe for such a bad PCOS of AMH of 11. And especially in lean PCOS, we have to be very, very careful.
Yeah. So basically, we also have to understand the mechanism of action of these two drugs, how clomiphene is acting and how letrozole is acting. So clomiphene actually is a non-steroidal compound similar to estrogen, which is blocking the estrogenic hypothalamic receptor.
Yes.
So it is blinding the hypothalamic pituitary axis and thereby triggering the release of FSH, whereas letrozole is an aromatase inhibitor and it is not depleting the receptors there. And by this, clomiphene causes multifollicular growth, whereas letrozole causes only a
monofollicular
dominant follicle grow. Absolutely, a monofollicular growth. Now, even the T half of CC is very high, very long. It is 2 weeks, whereas Letros has a very
48
short action.
hours. Yes.
Absolutely, only 48 hours. And the cost-wise, though they're just not much difference, it is 65, 165. So cost-wise, they're okay, but mechanism of action, their safety profile is markedly different. And now that we have these papers, it doesn't cause congenital anomalies. So now we are much, much safer and we are more confident in using letrozole.
Letrozole, yes.
Yeah. So this is the next. I think we have compared. Next, Dr. Nupur. Next, can you take a next slide, please? Yeah. So then we have the next question coming up, Dr. Nupur.
So the next question is to Sir Dr. K.D. Nair. A 32-year-old woman presenting with primary infertility since 5 years, irregular menses since menarche, cycle 5 to 6 for every 45 to 60 days, normal flow, BMI 36, married for 6 years with Batten tube, AMH 5.6, and day 2 FSH 5, LS 7, prolactin 30, day 2 scan, normal uterus, bilateral ovary, PCOM morphology, no agnosal pathology, husband semen analysis, basically a obese PCO patient, and couldn't lose weight despite lifestyle modification. Patient was put on clomiphene 100 milligram for 5 days daily, and day 12, day 15 scan, there was no dominant follicle, cycle was cancelled. So what will be our next cycle plan? Sir? Sir?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
BMI 36, and she has not responded to clomiphene with 100 milligram. The option is to either increase the dose of clomiphene. We have to keep on increasing dose. We can go up to 150 to 200 milligram. We can add metformin, and then we can switch to gonadotropin if there is no response with the clomiphene, or we can offer a laparoscopic ovarian drilling also.
Sir, in this patient, what is your opinion regarding addition of metformin with clomiphene or switching directly to gonadotropin? Because currently what the papers are suggesting is gonadotropin switching rather than combining with metformin has more benefits. What is your opinion on this?
You have to, it was already answered earlier on. If you consult the patient and if she's willing, she consult about the cost and the multiple pregnancy, I always prefer gonadotropin rather than increasing the dose of clomiphene. So for me, stimulating with gonadotropin gives a better result.
Better result. And how do you decide between laparoscopic ovarian drilling and gonadotropin?
Now, in this current scenario of corona, I will not opt for this option.
Okay.
Not right now. Laparoscopic ovarian drilling for such a patient, no.
Okay.
We take a procedure of laparoscopy only when it is a do and die situation like this, not ovarian drilling.
Okay. Okay. And sir, what about switching to letrozole instead of gonadotropin in CC resistance? What is your opinion on that?
You can use letrozole. Letrozole, if it is a clomiphene resistance, using letrozole can give you better result, but you should not use more than 3 cycles.
3 cycles. 3 cycles. So next.
Yeah. So since letrozole is the favorite of the day today, now my question comes to Dr. Sudha Prasad. Ma'am, what all protocols do you know about letrozole? How much dose? What step up, down? How do you use this drug?
Ma'am,
okay. Can you hear? Yeah.
Yes.
So once the letrozole has come in market with full-fledged, we start letrozole with 2.5, which is the DCGI approved dose. But in cases when you are giving 5 milligram daily from day 2 for 5 days, then you can talk to the patient that probably your scenario may not be very effective with the letrozole of 2.5. I am giving you 5. So you have to inform. This should be very, very clear, because 5 milligram is not confirmed, is not permitted by DCGI as a ovulatory drug. This is important. And initially, long back, I remember in 2007, 2008, the step-up dose came for the letrozole when the Sun Pharma brought this. But now I don't think anybody is giving, or I myself is not giving. I start maximum of 5 milligram from the second day or third day of the period. And I feel if the patient has to ovulate, patients in a PCOS patient or CC resistance patient, they ovulate with this. We have to do the follicular monitoring twice only. Once I call on day 10, and then the patient comes on day 12 or 13. That's it. Because we are planning for the IUI cycle, so it should be very cost effective, and minimal follow-up, minimal visit to the clinic should be there. This is very much important. If she is not conceiving, then we have to think over that we have to add gonadotropin with this. And in a patient, when you are going to do the IUI, as I said, it should be the cost effective. So I will prefer HMG in this. So we have to add little, like 75 IU only with the letrozole in the next cycle, or on the last day of the tablet, when the 5th tablet of letrozole she is taking, we can add on that very day 75 IU HMG for 4 or 5 days. And when we are calling on day 10, we will be able to see whether the follicle has reached to 2022 or not. Because I will like the IUI cycle, it should not be 16, 18. It should be little more than that, then chances of maturity is better.
Right. Ma'am, thank you so much for informing us about the 5 mg, that what we have to counsel the patient before, though he approves only 2.5 mg. What is your experience with 2.5? Do you have follicles there with 2.5 5 days?
See, if the patient is lean thin, BMI is less, lower than this, 2.5. If the LH is not very high, then 2.5 works. But in a majority of patients requires the 5 milligram. What my message is, when you start the 5 milligram, you have to inform to the patient that, see, I'm giving you the double the dose, which will be more effective for your stimulation. You have to inform them. This is important.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. So we have various about the various protocols with letrozole. Just to brief you, everybody, we have 2.5 mg daily for 5 days. We can even give 5 daily for 5 days. We can even give 7.5 mg for 5 days, as we give in clomiphene from day 3 to day 7. Then we also have a step-up protocol where we can give 2.5 mg, 5 mg, 7.5 mg, and 10 mg incremental after every 5 days. So it is something like a poor man's gonadotropin that we have, where the letrozole can pass out if the patient cannot afford gonadotropins. Because here also the pregnancy rates have been quoted as high as 27%. Now there's an extended dose protocol as well, where we give 2.5 daily for 10 days, day 1 to day 10. And in this we can do some CC-resistant PCOS patients, it can be done because it increases the FSH window, and by extending the mid follicular phase, and here it will give multiple follicles. So we can play with letrozole a little bit, but we have to be still careful. Dr. Nupur.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so another way to crack an egg, Dr. Shivani, interesting question to you. Role of CC plus letrozole in CC resistant PCOS. What is your opinion?
Yeah, so whatever the studies are published, it is said that if CC resistance is there, letrozole can help in about 43% of cases. You can get an ovulation. However, if you combine CC and letrozole together, then the success rate is the best. Almost 77% of cases there is ovulation present. So 2.5 milligram of letrozole and 50 milligram of CC on cycle day 3 to 7. is considered to be a good option in these cases.
Right. So this is something very interesting that Dr. Shivani has told us, that we can use both dual CC and letrozole.
Letrozole.
Yeah. So now
Another
Yes.
a very important recently a normogram has been suggested. How can we measure CC resistance even before doing ovulation? So based on the patient's parameter like free androgen index, BMI, we can predict the chances of ovulation also by charting. So if we chart free androgen index and BMI, and we can predict the chances of ovulation and the chances of percentage of ovulation that we get, then we plot it in another next of the graph along with the age and the type of menstrual abnormality the patient has. We can actually predict the chance of live birth. So the studies have now come up with a nomogram where we can actually predict where the patient will successfully have ovulation induction or not based on these parameters.
Can I add a comment on this?
Yes, ma'am.
On this normogram, we had a thesis for the postgraduate, but we found that the way they have mentioned, it's not working in our Indian scenario. Of course, everybody should know it, but we couldn't find that it is very worthwhile, and it has not worked. If some patient normogram is coming for 150 FSH, but we saw that after giving 150 FSH for 5 days, when we are calling on day 6 of stimulation, follicles are not proliferated. It has not started. So we have to be very, very careful when this data which is coming from West, we apply in our Indian scenario. This is important.
Ma'am, Dr. Anjali, I want your comment on this nomogram.
Frankly, am I audible first?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes. So nomogram mentions what? It is chance of ovulation, right?
Yeah.
And chance of live birth with what?
Clomiphene citrate.
With clomiphene citrate. So what is the question?
So
Dr. Prasad ma'am feels that it is not ideal for the Indian women, and if the nomogram, whatever it is predicting, we are not getting the right side. I mean, what we are expecting, that size of follicle we did not get on that particular day with the desired dose. Now, have you been using? What is your experience about it?
About letrozole or clomiphene?
About nomogram, ma'am. Have you used Have you been
Nomograms,
using
we
it?
haven't. No, sorry, we haven't. So I can't
Dr.
tell you
Neil-
my experience.
This normogram doesn't it is not used for dose of the clomiphene. It is for predicting whether when we use clomiphene, what will be the chance of ovulation and what will be the chance of live birth rate. So you, on one side, you plot the free androgen index, BMI of the patient based on whether she has oligomenorrhea or amenorrhea. Then you get the percentage of ovulation. Then that you plot in the right side of the graph, and based on the age of the patient, you calculate the live birth rate of the patient. So I believe this definitely Dr. Sudha's experience is more important here because she has tested it actually in the real scenario. So we need more studies with respect to this normogram.
Dr. Lupur,
Yeah, no, why I wanted to say one thing. Why you are going for nomogram? Well, it's a theoretical thing that with this kind of picture in the patient, this will happen. Okay, so we already know that clomiphene will work in some cases. There will be clomiphene resistance in some cases and clomiphene failure in some cases. So talking about simple things, nomogram may show you the success rate in a particular patient. That is how it helps, right? But then it's not very practical. We know that clomiphene may be not working in a particular about 10 to 15% definitely. That ovulation will not be possible, particularly with obesity, hirsutism, which is not controlled. The clomiphene doesn't act, and that is why we use clomiphene with metformin. And these patients, simply making it simple, will be helped by only gonadotropins. Letrozole also, we have experience of letrozole. Let me tell you about that also. That we use 2.5 milligram, and that is allowed. What you were talking, Jyoti, about different regimes, let me tell you very clearly that if you use 10 milligram and 5 milligram letrozole and higher, the birth defects and the longitudinal studies are not many. So there is always a chance that you are using letrozole in higher doses could be related to a congenital anomaly, and the patients can sue you that you have not used a standard protocol which is approved by our this thing controlling pharmaceuticals company. I mean, the regulations don't say that. So if the
Right.
patient becomes pregnant very early, if you are doing only IUI and letrozole is continued and she becomes pregnant, it's always a chance that congenital anomalies can occur. That is why they don't promote these extensive 10 days program or extensive 10 milligram going to that. There's always a risk that it is not cleared from the body and the baby can be affected. One thing. Second, letrozole and clomiphene, letrozole has only one advantage, that is preventing the OHS. You were talking about OHSs. I have not seen letrozole only being used and OHSs. No patient of mine had OHSs. Only when you use letrozole with gonadotropins, there is some chance of OHSs. Still, it is lesser than clomiphene with gonadotropins, OHSs, or only gonadotropin. So I would put it from OHSs angle. Gonados worst. Second worst is clomiphene and gonadotropins for OHSs. And third is letrozole and gonadotropins. Letrozole alone, I have not seen a case of OHSs.
Right. Ma'am,
Let
Dr.
me be very
Anjali
clear
ma'am,
about this.
how would you choose
Yes.
gonadotropin? What are the various types? Which is better? How do we choose? Please
In
highlight
which
on that.
in which patient? PCOS, you are saying?
I'm talking,
All.
we are
All?
talking general
Okay.
gonadotropins. What are the
Okay.
types? What are the various protocols?
Are
Because we are talking
we
of
talking?
basic and graduate.
Are we talking about IUI or are we talking about IVF? What do you want me to talk on? I will put
IUI.
it this way: if
We are
doing
talking
for
about
IUI,
IUI.
your aim should be not more than 3 follicles dead, not also intermediate follicles coming up, and gonadotropin should be least possible, like 37.5 or 75 per day, and go on increasing if there is no response. Otherwise, continue with the same dose for when you are doing IUI. But if you're doing with IVF, you are planning, then the doses, of course, will be 150 or whatever. And if you are doing for PCOS, the doses for chronic low dose, everybody knows, that start with 75 and then continue for 7 days, then go for further 37.5 increase, then further. That is how. But if we are using 150 or 225, there is always a risk of OHSS in PCOS patient, definitely. Also a normal responder. If you are using 150, 225, there is always about 2 to 3% risk of OHSS, whether it is a PCOS or a normal responder. So you have to be careful while increasing the dose of gonadotropin. And the higher gonadotropin we use only for 38 plus or 40 plus or 35 plus. So 300 or 225 to 300 and higher doses starting will be used only for higher age group and those who have poor responders, which we call poor responders. You know the Bologna criteria, you know the Poseidon. I hope everybody knows. So Poseidon criteria
We will
4,
be discussing
definitely HMG will be needed. You are talking of
Yes.
gonadotropin, so HMG definitely for the Poseidon 4.
Right.
Rest will be
So,
HMG added at 8th, 9th day. That is what I follow. Instead of giving Luveris, which is an expensive drug, we put the patients even normal or PCOS in small doses of HMG additional in the last 2-3 days. Last
right.
2-3 days.
So, absolutely, ma'am, for highlighting such practicals here. Just a small point to be added here that when we do a LH on day 2, and if it is less than 1, we add HMG, or we
Yes.
use a recombinant LH. But if it is more than one, then we use either a purified FSH or a recombinant FSH. So that is where we play with LH or purified FSH depending on the LH levels on day 2. And rest, as whatever you have explained very, very beautiful there. And now we have Dr. Survi, who can highlight the protocols that we use for ovulation induction.
Yeah, Jyoti, so before the protocols, we must be clear about a few things. One, when we give gonadotropins, an experienced person has to give it. All other factors of infertility should be ruled out. You calculate the dose according to the chart which you showed of age, BMI, ovarian reserve, and previous response. Your aim should be monofollicular growth, but saying that yes, there is a possibility of more than 2 follicles or 3 follicles developing. There is a possibility of ovarian hyperstimulation and of multiple pregnancy, and there is a possibility that we may cancel the cycle in case you hyperstimulate. In this kind of a patient, there would be 3-4 protocols we'll follow. One is chronic low dose. A chronic low dose protocol starts with 75 IU gonadotropin, and we don't increase it till 14 days. And we start increasing it by increments of 37.5 if there is no follicular growth. And we see the follicular growth every 7 days. So every 7 days we increase by 37.5. If the follicular growth occurs, we maintain the dose at that level till the follicle reaches a 16, 17 or 18 mm when we trigger. A low dose step up protocol differs in the fact that it is started at a lower dose, maybe even a 37.5, maybe a 75. But the increments are either 100% of the initial dose or 50% of the initial dose. There is no 14-day waiting period. We start increasing after 7 days. So this is how it differs from the chronic low dose. Next comes the step down protocol, where we start with 150 to 225, 225, and it really depends on the weight, age, ovarian reserve. And then we do an ultrasound every 2 to 3 days. And once we see that there is a follicle, we start decreasing the dose. So it is based on the fact that as the follicle increases, the sensitivity and the number of receptors in the dominant follicle increase. So when you decrease the dose, what happens is the dominant follicle, even with low FSH, will continue to grow. But the other smaller follicles which are starting to grow will get atretic. And hence you tend to get a monofollicular growth. So it simulates a natural cycle in the later follicular phase of the natural cycle. If the follicle does not grow, you continue to increase by 37.5 and maintain it for 10 days. And if it still doesn't grow, you need to cancel the cycle. A step up, step down, which is known as a sequential protocol, is that you increase every 3 days with an increment of 75 till maximum of 225. And once you get a dominant follicle, you start coming down again with 75 increments of lower of FSH every 3 days till you get a dominant follicle, and you maintain at 75 IU till you get the size as 16 to 17. And post this, for luteal support is definitely recommended in a hypo where the LH will be low. So you have to support, and in others also generally we tend to support, although there is insufficient evidence. We all do give progesterone when we are giving a gonadotropin cycle.
Yeah, perfect. I think Dr. Nupur, you would like to add anything?
I think Dr. Surveen has nicely summarized all the points. There is nothing more to add. She has taken all the recommendations from ASRM also. Thank you, ma'am. Moving on to the next question.
Yeah. So now, Dr. Neeta Singh, ma'am, we have this lady, 25-year-old, history of head trauma 2 years back, married for 1 year, reported history of secondary amenorrhea. So you must have assumed what I'm going to ask you now. Because of head injury, your the antennas open up, you know. So on investigations, we see that day 2 FSH is 0.8, LH is 0.6, AMH is 3 nanograms, protein is 20, TSH is 2, E2 is less than 20. Semen analysis is normal, ultrasound uterus is normal, but a thin endometrium less than 3. FC is 20. On a detailed history now, she was on oral pills for the last 1.5 years, which she has stopped 6 months back only. Now she wants to conceive. Please guide Dr. Neeta.
Hypogonadotropic hypogonadism looks like, secondary to the trauma, where you can see all the parameters are low, FSH, LH, E2, prolactin. And in this patient, you can see the endometrium is thin because the estrogen levels are very low. And the patient was responding to oral contraceptives. This is a very good thing that we have primed the endometrium. She has already taken contraceptive pills. So her estrogen, the endometrium is primed. She has stopped it and now she wants to get pregnant. So in this kind of patient, we have to give her the gonadotropins, and that too the HMG, because it will have both FSH and LH. There is no role of giving oral agents. And here pre-treatment, we say priming is a must, but she has already taken oral contraceptive pills and she has responded by menstruating. So the endometrium is also primed. And we have to start with a very low dose because these patients may sometimes hyperstimulate. So we may start by giving 150 international units of HMG and see the response, and we can escalate the dose depending upon the response on the ultrasound. All these patients, we have to trigger by giving them HCG, and the luteal phase is mandatory because of the very low LH, and the patient will not have any internal LH, so we have to supplement the luteal phase even in the IUI cycles.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. You have covered everything, and only one thing more to add, that because they might need lots a prolonged gonadotropin use. So we might have to be patient. We might feel okay, we have been on 15 days, nothing has happened. So I think we have to
Sometimes the cycle may go on up to 25 days, 27 days also. We have to be very patient and gradually escalating the dose of HMG until we get the required response. Yes, we have to be very patient with this. Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jyoti, for making that point clear.
So coming to the next question, Dr. Shivani, there is a 40-year-old female married since 6 years, executive in multinational company, trying to conceive since 2 years, BMI 22, known case of PCOS on metformin 500 mg twice a day since 3 years, AMH 3.5, following a healthy lifestyle with history of 3 prior failed time intercourse cycle, in spite of successful ovulation induction with letrozole. Ultrasound, uterus and egg are normal, bilateral ovaries PCOM, and husband is 40 years. Semen analysis show asthenozoospermia. What do you, according to you, will be the next line of management? If you suggest a protocol, what will be the best and what will be the starting dose, and what are the steps to avoid OHSs in this patient?
Thank you very much, Dr. Nupur. So in this case, we have two options, that we move on to either laparoscopy surgery or we do IVF for her. Personally, I would advise IVF, and the reason for that is because her husband also has a male factor and her age is also 40 years. But in general, I am doing hysteroscopy before I do IVF for anyone, because I do not want to miss out on any other factor, just assuming that everything else is normal, like a infection in the endometrium. So I would do hysteroscopy and move on to IVF for her. The best protocol for her, I would think, would be an antagonist protocol, and as you have put up in the slide, that the antagonist protocols will not only reduce the risk of OHSS, but also it will be cost effective for her because the dose of gonadotropins required is also going to be lower. At the same time, it is going to give her the benefit of equally good success rates. And for trigger, it depends. You can use, depends on her response. I will decide based on that whether I'm going to use HCG or GnRH analog. And as you have shown, recombinant FSH and HMG, there is no significant difference in the pregnancy rate, but there is a significant reduction in OHSS with FSH as per Cochrane.
And what are the measures we can take in this patient to avoid OHSS?
So measures to avoid OHSS is coasting. For example, if the estradiol level is more than 3000, you can coast and give the HCG or give GnRH analog. When the level is around 3000, use an agonist trigger. Something called HES, which is used on the day of egg collection. I prefer to use albumin because I have used HES. I found it to be absolutely useless. It did not work in even a single patient, but with albumin, we had really good results. With the problem of OHSS was not there. So I'm using albumin on the day of egg collection. Prefer to do day 5. I'm doing day 5 transfers only, and preferably either 1 embryo or maybe at the most 2 embryos, even though she's 40 years of age. Or my first choice would be segmented IVF, that is to freeze the embryos and transfer in the next cycle, because I can, that way I will get a good night's sleep and I'll eliminate OHSS totally.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Shivani, for your inputs in this case. So moving on to, is there any ideal stimulation protocol? Perfect or ideal ovarian stimulation protocol, one that will give an adequate number of oocytes. These oocytes should be of good quality, resulting into embryos with a very good morphokinetic scores, high implantation potential with minimal side effects and discomfort to the patient, and resulting in a term healthy singleton pregnancy. So next, over to Dr. Judy.
Coming on to, yes, Dr. K.D. Nair, sir, a very $1 million question to you now. The more the better. What do you say? Or is there an ideal number of oocytes which you would plan to get so that you get good success rates? So what is your personal choice? How many you like? How many eggs you would pray to have so that that patient conceives?
First cycle. If you can retrieve 15 oocyte, that gives you the best pregnancy rate in that cycle. So you should aim for around 15 oocytes. If you are getting more number of oocytes, then you should freeze them and transfer in a subsequent cycle. Otherwise, if you get 15 oocytes, you can transfer in the same cycle.
So if you have 15, you would like to go for a fresh embryo transfer?
If 15 oocytes, yes, you can go for fresh. If you're more than 15, then we go for like segmental. We freeze them and transfer in the next cycle.
I think you had also published a paper also, sir, regarding the number of oocytes as far as I remember. So that is why I wanted specifically you to answer this question. So you're not... Okay, so you have...
More the number of oocytes mean more euploid blastocyst. That is also there, you see. Because the fertilization rate is around 70-75%, then the blastocyst formation, and according to the age of the patient, the euploid rate will be different. So, and this particular study, aneuploidy is not related to the number of embryo generated. So aneuploidy is related to the basically age. It's not to the related number of embryos. So you have to be very clear. It is the age of the patient which reflects the aneuploidy rate, not the number of embryos. Yeah, this case. The younger the patient, one less number of oocytes, you can get a good blastocyst, one euploid blastocyst. For an older patient, you need more number of oocytes, and that is the problem. The older the patient, we get less number of oocytes. So that is a real difficult situation. You have patient 42-year-old, you stimulate, you will find 2 or 3 oocytes. So you have to either keep on collecting oocyte by 3-4 stimulation, and then you might be able to get one euploid blastocyst out of this all oocyte you have collected. That is the problem because she is 42. The euploidy rate is around 20%. So if you collect 5 blastocysts, you will get 1 euploid blastocyst. That is the problem.
Yes, this is a beautiful slide that Dr. Nupur has projected. And with 6 COCC in a young, we need 6 COC to get 1 euploid in a younger woman, whereas we need 16 COCs in a 42 to 43-year-old to get 1 euploid blast. So this is, as you said, in elderly, we are the reverse. We are getting less COC, whereas we need more and more there. We need at least 3 times as in a younger patient. So this is the irony, and that is why we need this accumulation. We need to do these embryo accumulation and do this to compensate for that. Now, despite the ICOS, there is sometimes unexpected suboptimal or low oocyte number, though we have done an individualized stimulation. So here we have another case, Dr. Nupur.
So my question to Dr. Shivani, 31-year-old teacher by profession, after 4 failed IUI cycles is now planning to start IVF cycle. Her AFC, a total of approximately 18, AMH of 2.5 nanogram, BMI 22, and she was started on recombinant FSH of 225 IU, and the same dose was continued for a total duration of 10 days. On the day of OPU, she got only 6 oocytes. Her beta HCG was negative after 16 days of embryo transfer. What is your diagnosis and what stimulation protocol do you plan for her in the next cycle? Which gonadotropin and what starting dose will you advise? Would you like to consider adding LH, and would you like to change to agonist cycle next time? My question to Dr. Shivani.
Thank you. Definitely, this is very disappointing to get only 6 oocytes. So we will have to investigate what this is called as low follicle to oocyte index, because if you have at least more than 50% of the follicle should give oocyte. If it's less than 50%, it is considered low. It could be that my starting dose of gonadotropin was low. She has some genetic defect in her FSH receptor. The follicle was asynchronous because in the previous cycle, I did not give her the oral contraceptive pill or anything like that to prepare. Or maybe there is some other technical problem like cold chain problem or problem in my trigger or something. So for this, what I would do is that I would think of first of all higher dose of gonadotropin, maybe switch to recombinant gonadotropin, maybe decide about recombinant LH administration, and if possible do her blood test to find out about the FSH receptor polymorphism in the form of that SIR680 variant to see if she has any variant of the receptor. This is, I believe, done routinely in some clinics in South India. I was told by Dr. Smita, she had gone for training, that they use this to decide the FSH dose so that no cycle of the patient is wasted. However, we are not doing this here. Secondly, I will definitely prefer to give a pre-treatment so that with 1 month of contraceptive pill, or I can even give her estrogen and progesterone, just like a mock cycle, so that her follicles are all synchronous, and use recombinant FSH and give recombinant HCG trigger. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Shivani. So very important group, hyporesponders. I think majority of the clinicians suffer from this problem where follicle oocyte index come out to be low, the eggs retrieved are low, and we need to search for 4 important causes, whether our starting dose was low, whether it was a genetic cause, whether it was asynchronous follicle growth or technical issue. So, here there are papers which are suggesting that recombinant FSH should be used, and it has been found to be, its use has been found to be associated with higher oocyte retrieval and higher oocyte formation. So coming to, as Dr. Shivani was saying, there is category of patients called hyporesponders. So over to you, Dr. Jyoti.
Yeah, Dr. Suveen, we are again coming to you, and we want a very vivid explanation. We want our viewers to understand what is this patient or strategy encompassing individualized oocyte number, what we call a Poseidon criteria. So what are the various? Please explain deep to all of us. Thank you. Dr. Sureen.
Hello, Dr. Sabeen.
थोड़ा सा स्प्रे कर देगा ना पानी का पत्तों पे तो कुछ नहीं होगा, हल्का सा कर दे आगे बाहर.
Anybody else would like to take this question? Dr. Anjali Tepe ma'am or
Yes. So when you have an unexpected response, that is Poseidon 1 and young patient. Poseidon 2 is when the patient is not young and expected response is not there. That is more than 35, 38. There are 2-3 slides. Every slide mentions more than 35. Some say more than 38. So I'm not coming to that age part. Younger patient below 35 and above 35. So where you don't expect a low response and she shows a low response is Poseidon 1, less than 35 years. Poseidon 2 is age more than 35 and low response, not expected, but you get it. Poseidon 3 is young patient and you expect a low response where the all clinical tests show that she is having AFC low and everything low, or FSH high, AMH also low. And Poseidon 4 is your aged patient who is having low reserve by all tests. So you want me to say which protocol for which patient you want me to say?
Ma'am, we'll come to the next question. Okay. The next question where this is a banker. She's 38-year-old banker. Remarried for 2 years now. On day 2, we do a AFC count, which is 5 to 6 on the right ovary and 3 to 4 on left side. Her AMH is okay, 0.9. Now we do a pickup. We get 5 oocytes on day 3. On day 3, we have 3 8-cell cleavage embryos and a ET is being done there on day 3. But after 16 days, we have a negative beta HCG report. Now she wants to change doctor. Now she comes to you. She has heard about you. Now, what different are you planning to do?
Literature is saying she's Poseidon 2, right? So Poseidon 2 is aged patient with a expectedly slightly lower response, which she has shown. She has 3 or 4 oocytes, but oocytes you said follicles were 5, right? So 5 follicles and 3 oocytes is not so bad. So she's okay. I will say it's a chance matter that she may not become pregnant. Anyway, you have to counsel the patient that you are 38-year-old, your chances of pregnancy as such, IVF success rate is lower than a less than 35-year-old first cycle. So I will not be too much bothered about her first not success. Why I'm saying that? Anyway, she is not likely to be pregnant in the first cycle. There's only 20% or 25% chance. A 75% chance she will not become pregnant. So she has to have 3-4 cycles to say that she is really going for donation or egg donation or whatever. So we will try. First of all, I will give her a second chance. Now, when we call lower responder, doesn't mean it is she's a lower responder. What happens is first cycle you label some patient as low responder. It's not true. There could be various technical problems like not giving even the gonadotropin was not managed properly, the cold chain I mean, and we think that she has been given full dose but she has not received. First of all that. Second is her age is against her. Third is antagonist versus agonist protocol. Agonist protocol gives slightly a higher success rate, pregnancy success rate. So I might go for agonist protocol. Fourth thing, if I am going to go for an antagonist protocol, I may change her protocol after confirming whether her cold chain was maintained, her what kind of urinary or recombinant was she taking, So 2, 3, 4 things we can change. One is changing the thing to recombinant, better drug, better synchronous follicles. You can do priming. We will come to that adjuvants before you actually show low response first time doesn't mean always she's a poor responder. Let me put it very clearly. 2 cycles of less than 3 is taken as evidence, not 1 cycle. Okay. So consecutive 2 cycles giving less response is labeled as low responder. However, her age is against her. So what I will do is I will change the protocol to agonist and give antagonist, agonist protocol and see that she has better cohort with recombinant. Or I may go with antagonist protocol with priming. Priming could be in the form of whether it's testosterone or estradiol valerate 4 to 8 milligram, different studies in the luteal phase of the previous cycle. I will start that and then recombinant and then going for trigger, which is HCG. I will prefer HCG trigger. However, some people say that agonist trigger is also better, but then agonist trigger will need a full luteal phase support. So I might change her protocol. Patient को भी थोड़ा सा ध्यान में रखो what she wants. If she wants agonist cycle, yes, go ahead with it. If she wants only antagonist that don't want a long cycle, I will still try for antagonist second time. And with a priming of estradiol valerate.
Right, ma'am.
Right.
Ma'am, what would be your starting of gonadotropins in this case, this time?
If I am
With
sure
what
that
dose?
she had taken recombinant earlier, then I need to increase the dose. If I am sure that she's taken some cheap urinary gonadotropins, which might not have efficacious drug, then I may stick to the same 225. But if it has
Let's say
been
she was on recombinant T225. Recombinant 225
Yeah.
she took last time. So what do you do now?
I will go for either 225, this with 75 HMG or 37.5 HMG, or this is my protocol. Actually, I do that. And sometimes I put her on 150, 150 start with.
Ma'am,
So start.
basically we want your protocol only. What
Yeah,
you
I do.
in this case?
I do urinary a lot because our patients, so 150, 150 or 150, 75 HMG right from the start of the cycle. I would do that. Recombinant
Okay.
150, 75 to, okay. So this will start from the very first day, second day, I mean, with
So
priming
you
of
would go
estradiol
with
valerate.
HMG right from day one
From the,
instead
yeah,
of adding LH later on. So that day one only you will start with the
yeah,
HMG.
day
And
two, I mean,
do
stimulation
you
day
think there's
one,
any
yes.
role, right? Any role of dose stim here in this case?
Dual stim, she is not that bad case. I won't call her a bad
Right.
case. 5 follicles are good enough in 38-year-old.
Okay. PGTA, would you think of?
PGTA, unless she has a history of abortions or she has a family history of congenital anomalies somewhere in the family, I won't go for it. PGTA, no, sorry. I will go
At
only when
38,
she does.
At 38.
No, that
Okay.
is PGTA is only indicated if there is previous failure of implantation, 2-3 bar, 2-3 times, or she has a history of recurrent abortions, or she has had IVF and she aborts at say 8 weeks or 6 weeks and then doesn't go further. This is a type of patient who will need PGTA. I'll do only indicated PGTA. 42 plus or 41 2 plus, I may do PGTA as a primary thing. I don't do it as a primary thing on patients who are 38-year-old.
And would you go in for a cleavage stage embryo transfer or a blastocyst transfer in this lady?
Good question. 3 follicles, if 5 follicles and 3 oocytes complexes, I will do day 3 transfer, and day 4, day 5 blastocyst is there. I will freeze it. I will
Right.
freeze. Cryopreservation.
Excellent, ma'am. So thank you so much for giving us your practical tips at how you manage these cases and specifically which particular cases do you go in for a PGTA, and not just any age matters, and you have to have a recurrent IVF fail or implantation failures, then only we go in for a PGTA. So that is a very important message that you have conveyed to all of us. And specifically, best practice in these cases is that we consider an ANTAB regime with an agonist trigger, and we do elective embryo freezing if we have AFC of more than 16 or echo dilation of more than 1.3. Now, PGTA also they say that consider, particularly if the patient is more than 38, and you should consider a single blast transfer. That is the best practice guidelines that they tell us. Dr. Nupur, what is co-stimulation? We were talking about that. What is that?
So, DuoStim protocol is a newer protocol which has come up. And it depends upon the basic mechanism behind the DuoStim protocol is there are multiple waves of recruitable follicles both in follicular phase and luteal phase, and it has been found that both the phases of cycle can be utilized for stimulation, and the oocytes can be collected in both follicular phase as well as luteal phase. So this is basically to shorten the time a patient undergoes in a shorter period of time rather than going for another cycle in the next month. So this is particularly useful in patients who are planning for fertility preservation, and also in poor responder patients where we want to collect more number of oocytes and more number of euploid oocytes. So this is how DuoStim works. And good part is that studies have been done. It has been shown that there is no effect on the quality.
Hello?
Yeah, Dr. Jyoti, can you move on to the next question?
Hello? Hello? Yeah, come on to the next question. Dr. Sudha Prasad. Dr. Sudha, ma'am, this 33-year-old lady, I don't know whether you are able to see the screen because I'm not able to see the screen.
Yeah, I can see now.
Dr. Nupur, yeah, can we come on to the question of Dr. Sudha Prasad?
It's already 6:30, so let us move on to the next question.
We have this 33-year-old gynecologist. She's a gynecologist-minded ma'am. She's married for 3 years and she had IUI 3 times. Her FSH is 9, LH is 7, AMH is 1, AFC is 2 follicle right side, 3 follicles left side. And we got 2 M2 oocytes. Now, after a pickup, she and her husband want to talk to you and find out what has happened, how many oocytes, what is the, whether we are planning a cleavage stage or a blast transfer or a fresh transfer or frozen transfer. What is the, what do we do? What is this embryo accumulation? And so she is ready with all those questions. And she, please, ma'am, Dr. Sudha Prasad, ma'am. Dr. Sudha, ma'am, are you there?
Unmute, somebody please unmute her.
Yeah, she
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So the patient is herself gynecologist, but this is the good part that she is less than 35, but she had 3 IUI failures. Okay, so BMI is not written in this. So we have done, she had only 5 follicles and 2 M2 oocytes has come. And if you see the classification of Posidion classification, she falls in young patient Posidion 3.
Right.
So she is falling in 3. So I'm happy that she is less than 35. So when the patient is young, even though the M2 oocytes are found, chances are that this is the better quality than the more than 35 years. So I will counsel her that we have made the embryos. These are the 2-1, and if her endometrial thickness is good and she is totally motivated, And we do not know because this patient with two M2 embryos, if it is embryos is there, then it cannot reach to blast. So I cannot guarantee that we will get the blast or not, simply. So I will counsel her either on day 2 or day 3. I
हाँ
will do
बेटा,
the fresh.
आप उनको भेजोगे ना, और अगर वो फॉस्फोमाइसिन
somebody is talking in between. Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
So what we can do,
Please go ahead.
I will tell her that I will transfer day 2 transfer or day 3 transfer, fresh cycle I will do. But if she's not very happy, that chances of pregnancy definitely will decrease. I won't say this will be more than 25 to 30%, simply. So in this case, if it is not there, then I will tell her to go for the next cycle, and this embryo I will freeze on day 3 cycle. On the day 3 I will freeze. So this will be the good part. If in the next cycle we will get 2 more, so there will be 4. So chances are there out of 4. Otherwise, at least 7 embryos should be there to get one blastocyst, which is euploid. So I will see that the next cycle, when there is no hormonal effect of stimulation, we will make a very good lining, and I will thaw that day 3 embryo. I will culture for 2 days, and I will see that the blast comes. And with the good counseling, I will transfer blast if she's ready. Otherwise, I will do that day 3 transfer, fresh cycle.
Ma'am, androgens, what do you like to consider? Androgens.
Androgen will be given before stimulation. Now you have given me the oocyte already in my hand. So I will tell her that one cycle from day 2 to next day 1 to next cycle day 2 for whole month. She has to apply 12.5 androgen testosterone spray, and probably the quality or number may increase, but it is totally small. It's not a good RCT has not been seen. So probably this may be the chance she can take for this because she is young.
Right. Next.
So my question to Dr. Neeta ma'am, 43-year-old lost her 10-year-old son in an accident and wants to try IVF to conceive. Her AFC is less than 5, AMH 0.4. She insists on trying with self-oocyte. Would you advise oocyte donation IVF? And would you recommend androgens, DHEA? And what protocol will be best in such patient? What would be the starting dose? Would you recommend adding LH, Duostim, and PGT in this patient? Dr. Neeta. Yes, Dr. Neeta.
The age is more than 35 and she has a poor ovarian reserve. So in this case, we have to counsel this patient very nicely. You can see the antral follicle count of less than 5 and the very low AMH. These patients sometimes respond because she's elderly. They respond to testosterone pre-treatment. These patients sometimes respond very well to testosterone pre-treatment. So we can give a testosterone gel or DHEA 3 months prior to starting the cycle. And then we can start the stimulation. I prefer antagonist protocol in these patients. We can use growth hormone as an adjuvant in this group of patients. Adding recombinant LH is not very beneficial. Instead, we can use the mixed regimen. That is, we can add 300 international unit of recombinant FSH with 150 international unit of HMG. So total starting dose of 450, and we can add the growth hormone from day 5 onwards, 0.4, and giving it alternate days, and then see how patient responds. If we get about 5 follicles, then we go ahead, we do the egg collection, and we can do the embryo pooling in these patients. If we get 2 or 3 embryos, we would like to bank the embryos, and we can have 2 or 3 stimulation cycles to collect at least 6 to 7 embryos, and then we can do a frozen embryo transfer. After banking these cleavage stage embryos, we can thaw them and then take them to the blastocyst stage, and we can do a blastocyst transfer. In my personal opinion, if we have a facility for PGTA, it would be worthwhile because of her advanced age. She's 43-year-old. And if we suppose have 3 blastocysts, then it is worthwhile that we do a trophectoderm biopsy. And now we also have availability of a non-invasive PGTA by using the spent culture media through NGF. And we get an answer that which one is a euploid blastocyst, we can transfer that. And the pregnancy rate are up to 30% even in this age group. If we do not get enough eggs, in spite of giving 450 international unit with testosterone pre-treatment or DHEA pre-treatment, adding growth hormone, obviously we'll have to counsel this patient to go for an egg donation cycle.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for summarizing it very, very in detail. And so coming on next to luteal phase priming, how does it, ma'am? Whether we should use progesterone, estrogen, OCPs. So what should we be using for luteal phase?
Regarding the luteal phase priming, we can use estrogen or oral contraceptive pills. In my experience, I have found that the estradiol valerate gives us a very, very good success rate if you primed the luteal phase with estradiol valerate.
What dose, which do you start? What dose?
We generally start from a low dose. We do not give a very high dose, maybe 1 milligram or daily, or we can go up to 1 milligram twice a day. And we can prime the luteal phase using the estradiol valerate till the patient is suppressed or she has a breakthrough bleeding.
Right. So to pill or not to pill in GnRH antagonist question here, and when patients have received, yes, ma'am.
There has been a lot of controversy about the previous pill treatment. The pregnancy rate and the cumulative live birth rate have been shown to be lower in the previous pill treatment cycles, and that is why as a changeover to pill treatment, patient the estradiol valerate or a progesterone pre-treatment have been recommended. So most of the people were using pill treatment for synchronizing the cycle or doing the patch IVF. So if you are doing, you do not have an in-house embryologist and you are batching your patient, you need to do some kind of synchronization of the cycle using pill. But pill has been really controversial in terms of success rate.
Right, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Yeah, there is something, we have this now delayed start protocol where we are giving antagonist for 6-7 days and then giving gonadotrophins, followed 4-5 days, after which we again start antagonist. So this is something new which is coming up, a delayed start protocol in cases of poor responders. Now, there is another thing where we have this andro IVF, where we are using pre-IVF androgenization and E2 priming is being done, where we are using transdermal testosterone gel 25 mg every other day, starting from first day of cycle, letrozole 2.5 mg daily, HCG twice a week, 2500 IU. We are doing the cycle with estradiol valerate 8 mg from day 3 to 14, and then using it to half to 4 mg till day 24, and giving progesterone from 15 to 24. So we are giving practically each and everything here, so as to try our luck here in these poor responders. Dr. Shivani, something new coming up here, the progestin primed ovarian stimulation. This concept is there. Can you please explain what it is?
Yeah, thank you. Because we have new vitrification techniques, so we can freeze the embryo. So that give us flexibility for looking at alternatives to the GnRH antagonist, which can be in the form of medroxyprogesterone acetate, which is given from day 2 of the cycle in stimulation cycles, so that you don't need to use the antagonist, because the cost of a single dose of antagonist is some 1800 rupees. And medroxyprogesterone, the whole tablet will cost you less than 100 rupees. So you compare 100 versus almost more than 10,000. So it can help you to save the cost. But the problem with this is that we have to it is given till the day of the trigger. We have to freeze all the embryos. And I have tried to use this very small, it came about 5 years ago. I think I tried to use it, but the embryo quality as reported by the embryologist was not very good. Although if you see the literature and the papers which are published, the quality is supposed to be good, and it is supposed to be really beneficial for egg donors or maybe even fertility preservation cases where you are going to do freeze all anyway.
Right. Wonderful. So any other who can comment on use of progesterone, if anybody has an experience? And because we are about to then close this session, anybody, Dr. Anjali ma'am, have you any experience using this? Because Dr. Shivani,
we are having one thesis by a postgraduate student, and it is already done, and they used MPA. Okay, MPA, you can use Difaston also. So either Difaston or MPA can be used, like Shivani has already explained. And but then the problem is all cryo. So the disadvantage of this program is that your cryo program should be very good, excellent. Then only you can do this. And that too, I don't see any patient going electively for cryo transfer unless she is counseled according to whatever. So we had to take a special consent from the patient that we are not going to do your the fresh cycle. So patient has to be ready to say yes, one thing. And secondly, after that, it is comparable. I would say the results were, it is already done. The thesis is already done. And the results are, they are comparable to any antagonist cycle with a antagonist. GnRH antagonist as a, I mean.
ma'am, what was the egg quality that you could get? Because Dr. Shivani felt that the quality of egg was not good. In
Actually,
your experience, how was it?
Dr. Renu was doing this, and she was quite happy. Rather, she wants to stick to that program. That is what she said. That whoever is ready to go for cryopreservation and then elective transfer can be taken for this. That is what she said, and she used it. She used it for all patients. Let me tell you, not poor responder, not anything. It was a all patients, whatever, no age criteria, below 40, I mean.
Dr.
But
yeah, I just want to comment here that the cost which you save from an antagonist in the private sector, the patient is actually spending on cryopreservation.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree, Surveen, I agree fully.
Cost effective.
And yes, absolutely.
And Dr. Neeta, you have anything to add?
No, we've not used it. As said that most of the patients should consent for freeze all cycle if you're using progesterone. So we've not used it really.
Right, ma'am. Dr. Nupur, can you please tell briefly what is this PMOI? Whether
the progesterone to M2 site index, normally the progesterone levels that we take on the day of trigger to decide for the transfer, some cycles 1.2, 1.5. So this paper actually emphasizes that irrespective of the total concentration of progesterone, and the part which is important is progesterone to M2 levels. If they are below 0.167, then we should go ahead with embryo transfer irrespective of the progesterone concentration, even if they are above 1.08. So this is something which we need to we can use, and we need to study further. Progesterone to M2 oocyte index, and it has been linked to equivalent implantation rates. And lastly, but not the least, is now orally active gonadotropin releasing hormone antagonist is now available. So soon we might have a completely needle-free IVF where we might have everything orally. And so this is a step into that area, Algolix, and it has been recently come up, dose of 200 to 300 milligram twice daily. And it rapidly, we know that antagonist rapidly reverses and suppresses pituitary gonadotropin secretion, and dose can be titrated, and it can replace agonist for suppression, and it is an attractive alternative to OC pill for both contraceptive as well as non-contraceptive purposes. So currently an effect trial is underway.
Yeah, anybody has used it? Anybody, Dr. Surveen? Algolix, have you used? Dr. Shivani, Dr. Anybody? Dr. Neeta?
No, we've not.
It's still under trial, I think. It's not available.
It's not available. I don't know if it is available in India.
No, it's not.
So this is
So
something
it is
new
in
that
America, it is available with the name of Orlisa.
But in India, it's not. It's not available. It's not yet approved in India.
Which company is that, Nupur?
Ma'am, that I have to search. I have taken from Orally. It is available in America by the name of Orlisa. That's what I know.
So Dr. Nupur wanted to bring anything on earth. So that is why she has added this. So thank you so much, Dr. Nupur, for highlighting us with this new orally active GnRH agonist thing coming in. And I would like to thank each and everyone, Dr. Anjali, Dr. Sudha Prasad ma'am, Dr. Neeta Singh ma'am, Dr. K.D. Nair sir, Dr. Surveen ma'am, and Dr. Shivani, who has been instrumental in organizing this whole webinar. So thank you so much for giving such great inputs. And we have discussed from basic to everything, except we have just touched upon hyperstimulation. Only one case we took, but I think we did whatever we could in the possible limited time. And I would like to thank Dr. Sonal Mehta, Mr. Sanjeev and Kamini in behind the scenes, behind the curtains actually. And
I would like to add, Dr. Jyoti, I would like to thank all the eminent panelists. It was an honor to be sharing this platform with you all. And it was great hearing all your experiences, all your practical experiences. It is definitely going to help us in our routine practices. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nupur, and thank you, Jyoti. You have done wonderfully well. Thank you. And
Dr. Usha Chawla, thank you for being with us. And Dr. Pooja Gupta, thank you very much. She wants to summarize some points, so I will send her the PPT.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Actually, there are many questions, but I think Dr. Shivani, we don't have time because we have already exceeded our minutes. And so I think we will, they can call us on individually, those who want to ask any question, can contact the, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Jyoti.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kamini. Thank you, Intas team. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.